Welcome into the Inspired Hive podcast, where we're connecting a community of remarkable entrepreneurs, CEOs, and professionals who've paved the way and who are inspiring others to rise up. I'm Margo Adams Larsen, your inspiration entrepreneur and host of the Inspired Hive podcast. And I am so glad that you're here. Today, instead of having a guest on, I want to have a chat with you. The beginning of a new year always brings up certain concepts in business and life, and there's some magic that happens around the transformation of one year into the next. And the main topic of that often seems to be what's next. That is what we're going to chat today about. What do you plan out for your next? How do you plan out your next? And most importantly, how important it is to actually have a next, something to be thinking about, to be dreaming about, something that you can be carrying with you as you're working on the right now and motivating you for that next thing. New Year's doesn't have to be the only time of year that you plan this out for what you want in your business and in life, but it's certainly a common time for doing this. And I'll add in a little bit here that large corporations, organizations, big and small, all focus around these same kinds of topics of thinking about strategic plans and what's coming next. So if you're listening in from that perspective as well, I know these ideas and things that we chat about are going to resonate for you too. Some of the basic things to contemplate is really about how we decide what those next are. And many a time we've kind of put them aside or pushed them down or forgotten how to dream about them. And along comes the resolution time of year where we dig out those goals that we set last year, or we dig out ideas and we start to contemplate. And we just wrapped up a vision casting workshop with one of the most important steps of this whole process of thinking about next in the idea of dreaming about what is coming down the road, what you want to create down the road, where you see that path going, and how you want to get there is part of that plan. But the very first step is that vision. You have to visualize it. You have to take some time to really dig in and jot some notes down, maybe ground yourself, dig a little deeper about where you've come, what you've accomplished this year. Maybe there's some things that you're still working on. That's absolutely going to be the case. But maybe there's some new kernels of ideas or things that you've kind of collected along the last few months or last year of the journey that you didn't have time for this year, but might be what's coming for next year. So you want to have that time that you set aside to do a little work on the visioning of what that next is. The most important is this vision will be a balance of things that are current or maybe more right now, and things that are going to take a little time to percolate and maybe build some steps or foundations for, so that down next year's time, at this time, you might be at a next level for building into that vision. The second step is about planning. Once you've crafted and realized what those kind of key visions are that you want to implement for your next in this next year, you want to take some time to really identify the details of that goal, the details of that vision, and then to break it down into some doable steps. Maybe you start with the end in mind and kind of figure out how it comes together in a backwards pattern. Or maybe you think about, wow, okay, in order to get to that next step, I have to do X, Y, and Z first. So maybe you're thinking about it in a forward chain. Either way, breaking it into doable steps will allow you to plot and plan those steps into your calendar, which is planning time to create that vision to bring it to life. It's kind of like cooking a recipe. You have to know how long it's going to bake. You have to know what the steps are, and you have to figure that out ahead of starting to connect all the ingredients together. The third thing that I want to mention here is the execution of your planning and plotting. A few key things to contemplate is to really honor the time that you've set up and scheduled to do the work, to take the time to focus on the tasks. The second piece of this is finding ways to remind yourself of the purpose behind why you're doing this. And the third is to recognize where those goals are and where they fall into that line of kind of purposeful thinking and where they culminate with that vision that you have for what your next is. The fourth piece of executing on your vision is making sure that you are also planning and plotting some break times. These are super important for you to be able to celebrate the wins that you've had, to take a moment to have perspective on the work that you have been doing, and to have a balance in looking forward to coming back to what you're working on in your visions and in your goals. A great example is when you are working on a report and you might be spending a lot of time focused on it. You might not see the errors until you take a break and come back to it. And then you might have fresh eyes to see what's growing and maybe what you might want to tweak, or you might have a new idea that you can incorporate in. As I mentioned, these are concepts that are familiar to corporations in terms of taking time to strategically plan their process of how they're moving forward, what they're working on next. But then they enter into that time of doing the work, and it's not constant planning, and it's also not constant work time. There's time to reflect, and just as important for you to have that time to reflect as well. Breaks from what you're producing now should be fun. They should be out in nature. They can be with colleagues, with friends, with family, and having time to focus on those other relationships that you're building, not just with work. And that allows that flow and that balance to happen so that you can be looking forward to getting back into the office to tweak things or try new things. Having that break time, super key to feeling refreshed and feeling energized with this. The idea of this chat about always having something next is really to be incorporating this concept of yin and yang, of balance, and being able to practice that shift and enjoying both of those endeavors so that you can feel a flow with life that isn't all work or all play, but it's an integration of things that grow you personally and professionally. You may be listening to this with this viewpoint of being a professional in practice, and you've had a series of nexts that have incorporated along the way into your journey that culminates to what you're doing now. The first step might have been graduate school. The next step might have been a licensure certification. The next step might have been employment. But along the way, you had some weekends, you had some family time, you had some other things that built in to that process. It wasn't constantly building your profession. If you're an entrepreneur listening, your journey may have started with working in someone else's business and then getting a promotion to learn how to teach someone else the job you were doing. And then maybe that next was about the next level of leadership that you may have taken on, or a CEO position. But there were weekends. You had some 9 to 5 or 7 to 7, or maybe if you're in a startup, it was feeling like a 16-hour workday, but there were still times for rest and times to be stepping away and doing other things. And these are just as key to focus on planning and enjoying as all of the things that you're doing in terms of your work and your organizational development or your professional development. So be reminded about the times that maybe you weren't as able to take breaks or you didn't take as many breaks. Noticing how your body felt, how your energy was, how maybe you weren't as productive as you might have been if even you had stepped away from that for a moment. The same is true in our hobbies. If we're not taking rest days, if we're running constantly, the legs are going to break down, right? So it's the same idea of making sure you've got those next steps planned. Set the course of inspiration on creating or following the path that you desire, and be sure that you're charting what those balances are, what those next things are alongside with your now. I'm going to share a quote to sign off today from Rosabeth Moss Cantor. To stay ahead, always have your next waiting in the wings. Thank you so much again for listening in to the Inspired Hive podcast. Stay connected by following us on the Inspired Hive podcast on social media. We'd love for you to like and share this out and subscribe for more inspiring content. We'll see you next time, and remember, live inspired.